Today, I'll be doing a video about the top 10 inversions I've been on. Inversions are elements on roller coasters that you go upside down in some type of capacity, and I personally think that these are very versatile elements for roller coasters because you can get many forces like positive G's or airtime. But most inversions are pretty boring and repetitive, but there are very elite ones out there, and I'll be talking about my top 10. But other than that, let's start. In last place is Flight of Fear's Corkscrew. Even though it's last, it isn't that bad. This comes just at the end of the ride, and it's a pretty solid ending for this underrated ride. But after the mid-course, you start slowly making your way down the ground, picking up speed on the way, and at the climax of that speed, you hit this corkscrew, which is pretty good. It has good whip to it, it's not that rough or headbanging, which is very nice. Plus, being in the dark while this happens adds to the experience, and if this ride didn't have as long of a line usually, I would ride this a lot more. Up next is Hulk's Cobra roll. This is probably the first element that you actually see on Hulk, and it's a great showing because it's arguably the best part of the ride, and it gives a very good first impression of this intense, insane ride. But the Cobra roll is just huge and powerful. It comes directly after the 0G roll and the launch, and it's so powerful, so whippy, and extremely crazy. The entire time you're crushed with some of the highest positive G's in the world, and it's sustained for like an easy 6 seconds while throwing in some insane whip from the left and back to the right. For anyone that loves intensity, this is probably higher, but personally super intense G-forces isn't my thing, so that's why it's lower, but I can appreciate how ludicrous this Cobra roll is. Gatekeeper 0G roll is here. This element is really enhanced by the location of where it actually sits. Don't get me wrong, the actual roll is good, but the keyholes is really what makes this element. You rise up, start turning to the right, and go through the first keyhole where you really do feel like you're just going to smack right into the wall. You continue rolling through and you get whipped through the second keyhole, which is just as good as the first one. This roll is super floaty, the keyholes and just being at the front entrance of the park is super cool, and I'm glad they added this very interesting near-miss element to this ride. The 7th place spot goes to VelociCoaster 0G Stall. This element is solid, but could have been so much better. It's such a short element, and that's why you really don't get any hang time, which is sad, but it makes up for it in different ways. Instead of hang time, it has upside down air time, which is very cool. Getting airtime while upside down is very weird, especially since you feel like you're going to get ejected towards the ground. Also, the whip in and out of the stall is very good too. The motion of getting in and out of the stall is smooth, but somehow very whippy at the same time. I do wish that the element was more elongated because then it would basically just be the perfect stall having hang time, whippiness, and all that, but overall it's still super good and super fun. Next up is another Cedar Point 0G roll, and it's Raptors. This isn't the best 0G roll on this list, but it's another solid one. The whippiness on this roll is probably the best on this list, or at least tied with another that's a little bit higher than this one, but it's still very good. You take this inversion with a ton of speed and go through this roll with lightning pace, and it's just great. While rising in the element, you start floating from your seat, and for the entire inversion, it does not stop. Raptor 0G roll is the best element on the ride in my opinion, and I wish B&Ms did inversions like this again because if they did it more, their coasters would be so much better. 5th place is Banshee's Pretzel Knot. This is probably the most intense moment on this list. Also, it's definitely the most unique on this list, being that it's the only one in the world and the second one ever made. And I don't really understand how there aren't more because it's pretty simple and really fun. It's really just a dive loop and then a Immelman that goes over the previous dive loop, and it's pretty simple. But it's very similar to a Batwing and how forceful it is, and if you've been on one of those, you know how intense those are. It's a straight 5 seconds of forceful G's thanks to how large it is, and it's a solid inversion, but not the best on this ride. The element to just miss the top 3 is Hulk's 0G roll. This really just is a insane roll. The amount of whippiness on this thing is absolutely crazy, and also tied with Raptor for probably the whippiest element on the list. You start the ride by going up the lift hill that's pretty well themed with screens all around you. You get to the top of the lift hill, the screens go from a whitish color to a green, and then you're launched from the lift hill, which is super surprising, good, and incredibly intense. You're stuck to the back of your seat the entire time, even while you're going through one of the tightest 0G rolls in the world. And since you're going into the roll with so much speed, it's insanely fast, it's floaty, so intense at the same time. It's great and an insane start to this and crazy intense ride. The first element in the top 3 is Banshee's inline twist. This is such a good element and a crazy contrast to the rest of the ride. Banshee has these huge forceful inversions, and the best one is the smallest one at the end. It's a super slow roll, so you get an insane amount of hang time even with the B&M vests. I love the contrast that this element gives this ride because it gives it such a diversity, and I don't know if many other B&M inverts around the world has this much uniqueness of an element and this much contrast in the actual layout itself. Going from an intense loop to a hang time filled roll is crazy but weird, and the best inversion at Kings Island in my opinion. The runner-up is Manta's pretzel loop. Even though this isn't the best pretzel loop in the world, it's still pretty insane and the most intense moment on this list when it comes to actual G-forces. You're soaring through the sky, then you fold down into the actual element. It's so hard to describe how it actually feels because it really is a one-of-a-kind element. There are really no other inversions that feel like a pretzel loop, so sorry if I can't explain it well, but it's insanely hard. But you wrap under yourself, and you're traveling backwards on the floor, which is weird, but kind of crazy at the same time. I don't know, it's so weird. At the bottom, it pulls a minimum of 4 to 5 Gs easily, and it's sustained for like an actual 7 seconds. It's actually insane. Easily one of the most intense moments in the world, and a good contrast to the otherwise tame ride that is Manta. Number 1 is the Mosasaurus roll. Of course I was gonna have the Mosasaurus roll at number 1. It was gonna take the top spot easily, no matter what other inversions in the world. I don't know if there's many others that could beat this out. But this element just sends you from your seat with some of the strongest airtime from an inversion in the world, and it's just crazy to experience this type of airtime while upside down. And it's right over the water, so you really do feel like that you could just reach out and touch the water because how close you are to it. Even though this looks like any other roll, it has some insane bite to it, and one of the best endings of any roller coasters in the world. Some of the best airtime in the world, a great spectacle from all angles around the lake, and if you're in Florida, you need to experience VelociCoaster and this amazing element. Thanks for watching, tell me your favorite inversions in the comment section down below, and other than that, have a good day.